Coopah, what's going on, brother? How are you?
I'm living the dream, man. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Of course, dude. I mentioned that I've wanted to do this for a while. I've probably learned more from you in the past 3 or 6 months. Every single tweet you fire out just gets my mind turning of like, holy shit, how do I allocate to that? Holy shit, why am I not thinking about that enough? So I've appreciated everything you put on. And it was about time we do this. We're living through a pretty wild time, man. Like NFTs going up. That's a headline that everyone's gotten familiar with. New all-time highs every single day. You have ETH almost at all-time highs now, and Bitcoin back above 50K. Like every area of crypto is ripping. And you said you think it's going to get crazier in quarter 4.
Yeah, absolutely. I think looking around me at the IRL conversations I'm having, family members are reaching out to me. I think for the first time ever, crypto is becoming digestible to people. It's not only about investing in something that has this weird like allure of magic internet money. People can start to wrap their head around things like digital collectibles. Creatives are getting in the space. And I think the markets that people are entering into now feel a lot more familiar. And especially in the wake of this whole meme culture that we're living in, I think it's going to be a really exciting next quarter here.
Yeah, it's like the only comparable time was 2017, 2018 when things were this wild, like fun and lucrative. But I think back then it was a little bit, I don't know. I think it was a little bit more of an empty game in the sense that we were investing in things like, a decentralized Uber marketplace, which might launch in 40 years. It's like, I kind of just want this to hit an exchange and this isn't going to end well for everyone. Right now, I think you have a combo of not only is it lucrative, but also, things are a lot more promising, both on the DeFi front. You have, on-chain cash flows. You can see the activity. You can see the traction. And then the other side of the spectrum is what you just said, investing in culture, investing in NFTs, which has been the killer app for a lot of people of saying, no, I do want to support my favorite artist, or I do understand that if I'm spending a ton of time online, like these things are going to have value. So it's a really cool combination of both those things. How'd you get to where you are, man? Like I've seen you featured in CNBC. You had this tweet the other day about investing in a CryptoPunk when it was low 5 figures. That's probably worth $500,000. Like, how'd you get to this spot now where you're on the forefront of being able to focus on this every single day? How'd you get to it, and what are you doing right now for some background?
Yeah, it's been a long journey. About 5 years ago, I was in school for music business. I had a professor tell me about the idea of smart contracts. And for those who aren't aware, in the music industry, when I stream your song on Spotify today, you won't see a dime from that for about 6 months. So when I heard about a technology that lets me pay you in real time for a fraction of a penny, it made perfect sense to me. From there, I started diving into more of these Ethereum-based projects, thinking about the use of this technology. I've always had a very entrepreneurial background. I was selling Pokemon cards on eBay. I was doing a lot of music creation in college. And so when I found a new industry that let you be really self-taught, it immediately spoke to me. I won't lie that those first year or two was definitely a bumpy learning experience. Luckily, I rode the whole ICO wave in 2017, found out how to trade really well, as anyone in the market could at that point in time. But in 2018, when things started crashing down, most of my friends left the space. They're like, oh, this isn't making me money anymore. I don't want to spend time here. That's when I really doubled down. I started going to Ethereum conferences. I started finding people that were really driven and focused on advancing this technology. And throughout that, I discovered things like DeFi very early on. I started reporting on a lot of the best projects at their inception, really got involved in governance, starting to work with team on token launches and doing on-chain community building. And very quickly, I realized that DeFi was exciting from a profit perspective. I was making a killing. I was getting insane APYs. It was super fun from like a return perspective, but I kind of realized that making more money didn't drive me as an individual. I kept coming back to this like creative roots I had from music. That's when I started thinking about things like NFTs, DAOs, social tokens, finding ways to take the community ownership aspects of DeFi and applying that to more creative culture. It really allowed me to sit at the center of this whole culture crypto intersection that, I'm very lucky to be working across about 15 to 20 different projects today to help advance that movement.
It's awesome, dude. Crypto's a spot where, if you're exposed to like anything, basically you're doing well for the past 3 or 4 years if you stick around. If you're exposed to Bitcoin for the past 3 years, you're doing well. If you're exposed to ETH for the past 3 years, you're doing well. If you're exposed to DeFi, but the way to kind of really outperform is, and what did it for you was finding something that you're actually genuinely aligned with. Like, okay, DeFi, I'm exposed to this, it's doing great in my portfolio, but like what drives me when I wake up? And that for you, I think, was the NFT, metaverse, social token type stuff. And that's kind of what provides the alpha, not only in terms of like what you're interested in and where you're going to have an edge in learning about it, but also the returns. And that probably led to your decision with the punk. Like, why buy a punk last year? It's such a, as people are listening, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? If I would have, I would have bought a punk last year. It's like, well, no, you wouldn't have, because you didn't do it. You bought a crypto punk last year and then held through it, which is probably an even harder decision. What led to that, man?
I was starting to see that CryptoPunks had high social capital within the DeFi community. At that point in time, the floor was about 1 ETH. It was about $300 at the time. And I was so over allocated to DeFi that I started looking into other areas to start diversifying my crypto portfolio. The vast majority of my investments are in crypto. And so having it so consolidated into one sector felt very small-minded. And so I started looking around for good NFT investments. CryptoPunks at the time felt like they were the most notable. Frankly, at that time, there was not a lot of good choices. It was basically either a CryptoPunk or one of one piece of art on Super Rare. And, while I was collecting on Super Rare, I noticed that there was sort of a collectible aspect to CryptoPunks that just felt really cool and interesting. And I think the funny anecdote I like to tell here is when I bought that CryptoPunk for 1 ETH, my friends were roasting the shit out of me. They're like, bro, why are you spending 1 ETH on this thing? This pixel image, like, what are you doing? Like
$300 too. Not a $4,000 ETH. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were like, no, man, like there's so many DeFi tokens, like the TVL on this protocol is insane. Like, the market cap, the TVL on this thing, like, why would you invest in this? But I just saw something that felt really cool and exciting. It was a different way to sort of flex your involvement in crypto. It felt like a different vertical. Your capital was not now tied to your ERC20 tokens in your wallet, but actually to things that had a visual identity to them. This was far beyond people really doing the whole like profile picture movement. There were a couple of punks here and there on Twitter, but I don't know. It was kind of just a wild guess. And I'll be honest with you, I could have never guessed it was going to get to the point that it is today. But at this point in time, I have one punk, that one that I bought for $300. And I think I'm never going to sell it. I mean, the social capital that comes from owning the punk is so much higher than any amount of money that it's a no-brainer to me that you're going to get lifetime benefits from having it. You get entry into a very exclusive club of collectors and holders. And I think that cachet of just holding something like that is something that's never going to go away.
Right. That lifetime value is that's like the click, I think, in most people's minds. Even if they still don't get NFTs until they buy it, once you buy it, the access that it gets you with the group of, not only just the leverage and the flex, but like working with people that have aligned interest, having access to what those people are investing in, what they're thinking about, I think it's so intangible. That's like the intangible side of NFTs that doesn't click kind of until you do it. Man, it's just wild. You and Deez are probably two of the only people I've had on the show that, when DeFi was booming, you were like, you know what, this is going great. There's probably more upside here, but I got to go with punks. And obviously that trade worked out really well. It seems like those OG NFTs, Gary Vee has talked about this a lot. OG NFTs, kind of things with provenance, things that were around in 2017, 2018, have avoided some of the cash grab NFTs that have launched recently. And not all new NFTs are cash grabs. There's some really promising projects and new ideas and new experiments. But it seems like those OG NFTs will kind of always have a bit of a premium. Ether Rocks being a good example. Can you think of any others that kind of fit into like the punks, the Ether Rocks? Like what other OG NFTs kind of excite you or are super interesting from that era?
Yeah, I think this is why you're seeing art blocks become so popular today. Art blocks are the closest classification to that. This was the first generative art series that was very organic in nature. You could go ahead and mint that for 0.1 ETH. There was a lot of people just spinning this up in the last year or two, just vicariously minting art blocks. It was like, oh, I'm popping out a squiggle. Oh, I'm popping out this Fidenza looking image. Like it looks aesthetically appealing, but there wasn't a lot of economic thought behind that process. It was just building a community. It was like, hey, we think that this looks cool. Let's just spin it up. And then I think as you started to look at where capital was sort of converging on, as these collectors started to make killer gains in crypto, both on DeFi and on NFTs, they wanted to allocate towards something that felt really organic and natural in nature. And I think when you look at projects like CryptoPunks and like art blocks, you find that these collectors are so sophisticated and done so well off that it's not about the money for them anymore. In the same way that people in the real world collect traditional art hang in their house from these prominent collectors, these certain NFT asset classes are the exact same thing in the digital world. And I think when you look at something like a Fidenza, your gut reaction to something being worth 300 ETH is that that's insane. It doesn't make any sense. It's a bunch of squiggles and lines and whatnot. But when you look at the cachet of the collectors who are collecting that work, and then you start to think a little bit more deeply about the culture that can come from those series, I think it makes perfect sense why a project like that has done so well today.
Right. Like any historic moment of any culture, as time goes on, that becomes more and more important. And as we're in kind of this revolution of, wow, you can actually kind of maintain that's one of one, or that's X amount in a certain copy of this specific time period that represents this. It's pretty easy to see the value there. Ether Rocks are one that kind of blew my mind. And obviously that's such a easy one to look back on and be like, God, that would have been great to buy a rock. Ether Lambos is kind of an interesting one. That's kind of that same era. It's like hilarious. It's almost so dumb that it kind of makes sense. Like there's only 1,000. It's a flex. It's just funny, man. Those OG NFTs.
Yeah. The only one I'll call out is autoglyphs. I mean, I think that Larva Labs have just solidified themselves as such a prominent leader in the space. There's a lot of talk about CryptoPunks, not as much talk about autoglyphs. When you start looking under the hood at the sophisticated NFT collectors, you'll notice that autoglyphs are debatably the most rare NFT in existence right now. And this sort of secret society of NFT collectors, I think, has levels that you can never really fully go down. But as you start to get into that conversation, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like highly sophisticated collectors allocating to an asset class that you can only know about if you're super deep into it.
Right.
And then once you know about it, you have to have been early enough in the first place to even be able to own it.
Right. It's pretty cool. It's pretty damn cool, man. There are so many levels to that game. What do you think separates, kind of looking at some of the new NFTs and the NFT mania happening right now? It's a lot tougher for a project to kind of boom or take off or reach escape velocity now that supply hitting the market is so much higher. Some of those are cash grabs. Some of them are actually really promising ideas. So it's tough for the promising ones to kind of separate themselves. One that's been able to do it has been the Bored Ape Yacht Club. And the ape community is fucking insane, man. Like, you post a tweet about anything, there's probably an ape replying to you. Or if you see, a new athlete post their ape, it's like instantly there's 100 people. Nice ape. And they're all apes. What do you think separates how was the Bored Ape Yacht Club able to do this versus, the hundreds of other profile pic NFT communities? Because that's kind of what they are. It's, I think, less about the art, more about the community. How were they able to kind of rise to where they were, or rise to where they are now, versus what separates them?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it was the right place at the right time. It was one of the very first profile picture projects that came to power. I think the wealth creation opportunity that happened for that makes it a very, vicarious flywheel. A lot of the people that minted those, they had never really seen success in crypto before. I went and minted something for 0.08 Ether that now is worth anywhere from 40 to 50 ETH on a given day. That cycle of wealth creation is something that people are never going to forget for the rest of their life. And the amount of traders that had that very first experience of making it big on the back of apes, I think it creates this stigma around it that, this was a life-changing opportunity for a lot of people. And as people look to enter into this asset class, realistically, CryptoPunks have become far too expensive for someone to make their first purchase as a CryptoPunk. If I'm an athlete or something like that who's new to crypto, me allocating close to $500,000 onto a digital asset is a very serious decision. But something like a ape, which has a very strong social community around it, you notice that more of the individuals that I would relate to on a day-to-day basis are collecting these things. It's less about like sophisticated crypto investors and more just about people who are excited about the idea of NFTs and culture in general. And so it's this nice kind of middle ground. And I will say that the one thing that apes have done incredibly well that I don't think CryptoPunks have done too well is just be very free and giving back to their community. All of the different airdrops from the Kennel Club to the Mutants to a lot of the merchandise and exclusive giveaways. They're really prioritizing their grants program, making sure they're doing meetups IRL. They are doing extremely a lot to double down on community as much as they can. I think that the stronger that those individuals feel tied to one another, the more successful the project's going to be as a whole.
Right. I see a lot of projects now. I think I don't know if there's the wrong approach. I can't say it's the wrong approach because it might work, but I think a lot of people are going to be looking for the next BAYC, the same way that people look for, is this going to be the next CryptoPunk? People are now saying, well, BAYC is kind of the golden standard of nothing's going to touch punks, but what if my project can be the next BAYC? Do you think we'll have, I guess the better question is how many NFT profile pic kind of communities can rise to be that big? Like, will there be other things that have 30, 40 ETH floor, or did BAYC hit it at such a right time and have enough of its kind of early investors get that wealthy that they're attached to it, make it a strong thing, continue to support it? Will we have other BAYCs, or is that also kind of now in a league of its own like punks where it's going to be hard for other projects to hit?
It's definitely going to be extremely difficult to replicate. I'll say that as we move into a digital world, there's an infinite number of identities and combinations that we haven't even begun to think about. The way in which we wear our digital identities online right now is very, very nascent. And so you start looking over a 5 to 10 year time horizon of how do I live in the metaverse? How do I dress in a virtual world? What does that avatar give me rights to in that virtual world? I think there's a design space that's completely unexplored. When you start thinking about the number of different sports teams, the number of different esports gaming organizations, the number of different skins in Fortnite, there is such an infinite number of combinations that I believe there's going to be an exponential amount of micro communities that have extreme wealth creation events. And as an individual, I think your goal is to find communities that you really align with and double down. And in the event that you can make that community valuable, I think it's going to change your life forever.
Yep. That is a cool kind of thing to think about. Right now, if it's the crypto community all trying to find like an identity in what we're spending our time in online. But I mean, the gaming communities, the sports communities, those are all going to have their own subsectors and trees, which break down even further. So, We'll see. There's going to be a lot of projects hunting Bay-C success. We'll see how many make it. All right, so the whole world's focused on NFTs. It's been a really fun NFT summer. Even if you don't like NFTs, you have to be looking at them. It's just, how can you not? With the activity, with the price rise, number go up, technology always helps. But it seems like at least the smartest investors I follow are starting to think a lot more about DAOs. And this is kind of like, it reminds me of when DeFi was happening. You had people like yourself and D's who were probably like, guys, I think we should be looking at NFTs. This could be next. And most people are like, no, let's focus on DeFi. Right now, there's probably a lot of people saying, let's just focus on NFTs. But you have some really sharp minds saying, guys, I think we should start shifting more attention to DAOs. You've been on the cutting edge for a few of these kind of transitions in crypto. You're focused a lot more on DAOs. I know it's important that I need to learn more about it. So why should we be thinking about DAOs? Why could this represent, why could 2022 kind of be the year of the DAO?
It's a great question. I just like to think of DAOs as internet communities with a shared bank account. I think NFT collections are fantastic on an individual level. There's high profit opportunities, but where it falls short is that capital is often not allocated on a group-wide basis. It's usually one individual making a trade, making a profit off of that. But DAOs really force people to come together and have those conversations, in public. And I think when you start to think about the way in which we organize as digital communities, doing these investment decisions together, having more curated discussions about where we're allocating time and attention, it's a really powerful motive. This notion of multiplayer crypto, I think, is extremely powerful. I think right now we've only barely scratched the surface of that with things like party bid and with fractional. And over the next 5 to 10 years, the way you make investments is going to be heavily based around the people that you spend time with. Mm-hmm. I think DAOs are the best way to get you centered into a group of individuals that are saying, we all share similar financial assets. Our biggest value add is to make these assets more valuable. And the way that we do that is by working together to allocate capital across different products and services to make the likeness of this community go up. And so the way I like to think DAOs is a sustainability and a maturity type thing. Something like a GameStop or an AMC or a Dogecoin, that's a mimetic moment. It goes up to the moon because everyone's really excited about it, but it kind of stops at that meme. There's no development on a product side outside of that. There's no working teams that are being paid by that community to go and do work over a longer time horizon. And so I basically see DAOs as the new LLCs, the digital layer to organize companies and communities around projects. And I think the more that we build out that framework, the easier it's going to be for these assets to reach billion and trillion dollar valuations.
You have DeFi DAOs like Uniswap, right? Like you have some of these DeFi protocols are basically DAOs. You have a governance token and people can vote on how they think it should upgrade or what the token should include. Then you have some NFT projects are now kind of acting as DAOs where, all the NFT sales, maybe that money goes to a treasury and then you can decide how the NFT project moves forward. Is there like a third sector of DAOs that aren't focused on DeFi or NFTs?
Yeah, I like to call them social clubs, basically groups where there's not a lot of focus on driving revenue back to a treasury. It's on building strong relationships amongst members of that community. And I think what you start to see is that value is not only financial in nature. If you're creating working groups where people are meeting one another, they're finding enjoyment on their personal day-to-day basis, meeting other people and learning about things like NFTs, DAOs, social tokens, whatever it might be, there is a value there. And I think for the first time in crypto, we're starting to think about what is the value of a community, or more specifically, what is the value of a token when we're thinking about it in terms of community? Right now in DeFi, we look at metrics like TVL, we look at metrics like protocol fees generated. But what from any major DeFi project and basically any token is that token price goes up because the community is really excited about it. You have some guy on Twitter with an avatar of a token price talking about why the technology is amazing, blah, 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 why these integrations are so special. But in reality, it's just people that have bags just pumping their tokens because they like to win together, And so when I think you strip away all that extra window dressing about why something is like, quote unquote, valuable, the reason it's valuable is because people are holding that token and talking about it. And I think these social clubs really get down to the core of that and say, hey, if we're all in a group together and we all hold these tokens, how do we make this club as valuable and exclusive as possible so that we can be winning together as we grow the likeness of this community that we're building?
Okay, so this is interesting. I want to use one that you're involved with, one that you helped build as an example, Friends with Benefits. What's like the day-to-day, what's the objective, I guess, currently that you're working towards? Or what are some of the bigger picture things? Because that's still kind of a fuzzier or a little bit gray idea for someone of like, okay, what are we working towards? What's the goal or objective here with Friends with Benefits?
Yeah, Friends with Benefits is a culture crypto community. We like to think of ourselves as a digital city. So we are basically building products and service to expand the likeness of our digital city to every aspect of the metaverse. What this looks like is bringing in cultural leaders to talk about the way that technology can connect into the mainstream. We're doing a lot of events to connect and bring people together to share experiences and share their learnings. And what we found is that community building product is exponentially more valuable than product building community. we don't have a specific agenda for building one type of product or trying to make revenue from one type of service. Instead, what we have is a amazing community of people that are all working in crypto in some way, shape, or form. Most of them more creative in nature. And what we're trying to do is build products to capture that creative energy and help bring that stuff on chain. So some things that I'll call out is F3B Gallery. This is an auction house built on top of Zora where you can curate an NFT series, say, hey, we think these NFTs are really valuable. We're going to shine a spotlight on it and allow our community to go out and really be advocates about that so that we can help spotlight whatever that series is. Another one is a product called Gatekeeper, which is for IRL events. So if you want to have an IRL event and make sure that everyone's holding an on-chain asset to attend, we've created an RSVP system where you need to hold that token RSVP. And when you come to the event, we scan a QR code that makes sure that you're still holding those assets. And so when you start to take a step back, you notice that it's basically a way to tie, on-chain assets with like cultural movements and cultural communities. And I think we just sit at the center of, developing products and services and giving people a home to work on those type of verticals in a really crypto native fashion.
And then because both those concepts sound absolutely fascinating, how does that value go back to the community then? That you have a token that represents your stake in the community? Is it how much work you've put in, or how is that kind of split amongst the community? How does everyone see upside there?
Yeah, so the FWB token represents ownership in the community. The original thesis of FWB was hold 50 tokens to get into a Discord server. This was basically a spam filter where if you had some amount of skin in the game, you knew that conversation would be slightly higher in quality.
Yep.
What we saw over time is that as that token appreciated in value, so did the quality of those conversations, so did the quality of the members that were joining that. And it transitioned away from being solely about access into a group to more being about, we know we have access, that's the default here. What does it mean for us all to build something collectively now that we have this shared sense of ownership? And so everything that we built routes back to a treasury, FWBDAO.eth. For the FWB Gallery, we have on-chain revenue in the form of commissions. So if we do a sale for an NFT, we'll generally take anywhere from 5 to 10%, route that back to the treasury. And for these other products and services that we're building, when we're working with partners on sponsorships or doing things that bring in revenue from more conventional ways, we're always making sure to direct that back into the treasury. I think right now, with where FWB is at, it's less about the on-chain revenue that we're generating and more about the value of that community. And I'm excited to get to a point where we can now have, products and services that represent that intent.
It's a wild it kind of flips a lot of what projects are doing right now kind of on its head. It's not only exciting for me, you've attracted interest from institutions as well. I think you guys just raised $10 million from A16. How the hell did that come about? Why is that exciting? How are they going to work inside of a DAO? Like, how do funds now participate? Because inevitably, as some of the sharper investors and minds start getting into this, if there's value there and as this continues to be bigger, there's going to be funds that have a lot of money and say, holy shit, how do we get in? How do we participate? And that's a little bit different than an individual that wants to contribute to a community. How will a fund work, and what's the move here?
It's a really fascinating topic. I think investing in DAOs is challenging funds to be highly flexible in how they make investments. They are buying tokens out of a community treasury. They're not buying equity from a founder in a backroom deal. They're buying publicly directly from a community of token holders. And so specifically for F3B, this was a very inbound conversation. We've been doing our thing for a year. We literally came up on a year anniversary about 2 days ago. And people started to realize that there's something really special here. You come to one of our town halls and there's 300 people sitting on the call. We have 100 people working on the community on a day-to-day basis on everything from product, editorial, membership, and treasury. And when funds started to look under the hood, they said, hey, we want exposure to this. But unfortunately, that conversation is not a one-on-one with me as someone early on the project. That's an open conversation with the community. And so what we did is we did this really open governance process where we hosted an IRL event in New York. We had a town hall running through our roadmap. Then we had a Q&A session where all of those firms came in, participated in an open discussion about who are you, what value does your firm provide, what should I be expecting from you as a participant in this network? And we started to talk through things like delegation. So typically in these scenarios, you notice that these large venture firms hold all the voting power. You go and look on a proposal in a DeFi protocol, and It's like 99% in favor from one or two actors or something like that. We said, we like the idea of bringing on capital to expand the likeness of what we're doing here, but we don't want to create the system in which we're beholden to the people who funded us to drive this community forward.
Right.
And so something I'm really excited about is a 50% delegation threshold. All these firms participating are going to be delegating 50% of their votes to our community leaders. So FWB fellows and scholarship recipients and team leads. And I think over time, what you're going to notice is that this process of humanizing venture capitalists, having them come in and talk about who they are on an individual level, it helps deprioritize the stigma that they're evil. And it also helps to create a sense of ownership and responsibility. If I'm a venture capitalist and I'm going to a community and saying that I'm going to be active in this community, and then I don't do it, you're going to get flamed. And so I think that there's a big challenge that happens here for venture firms where if they want upside in these communities, they have to be active in it. We're no longer in a world where you can go and give a founder 10 mil behind closed doors, sit there idly and vote on one governance poll every 6 months. Like, you need to be in the trenches. Yep. And I think for a lot of firms, that's a really scary notion, but specifically for the ones that joined this round, we felt very confident about the way that they were planning on contributing to the community. And I'm really excited to hope to see this as kind of a standard for the way that DAOs raise moving forward.
That's wild, man. Are you one of the first DAOs to raise that much from a fund? I mean, that has to be.
No, I mean, okay. I'd say like first 10, maybe. There's probably about 10 treasury diversification proposals that they're called, where it's basically a direct sale of tokens from the treasury to funds. Some of the other ones I'll call out. Sushi Swap had a pretty contentious one not too long ago.
Yeah.
Badger DAO had a really good one. Lido had a really good one. We raised a small amount of capital from a treasury diversification proposal at FWB not too long ago. Friends with Benefits had one of these. Forefront had one of these. Seed Club had one of these. Couple other ones, but it's becoming more and more common. And I think the thing to take away there is the valuable asset is the token. There's no longer this pass-through vehicle of investing in equity in the company to later have that convert to tokens. We are recognizing as an industry that the valuable asset is the token, and we don't need to putz around that anymore. Once the community is sufficiently decentralized, buy the token. Don't buy equity shares from a founder and sit like in the sideline. Buy the same thing that everyone's holding. And I think together that helps drive the notion that this asset class is extremely valuable.
God, so cool, man. Ari Paul had a really good thread on this, and he was kind of recognizing the value of DAOs and saying, it's clear to me like that this is exciting, that there is value here, that there's going to be more activity, but how do you position as a fund? We're starting to see some of the first examples of how funds are going to get involved. For the individual, though, for people listening and saying, well, how do I get in? And whether they look at Friends with Benefits, whether they look at a number of other active DAOs, what is the best way? I know you said to just dive in and get active. Like, there isn't a 101 guide, but there's still going to be people that listen and say, okay, how do I dive in? Like, what does that tactically mean for people that say, holy shit, this is cool. What do I do next?
Yeah, I think information aggregation is extremely important right now. As the DAO gets bigger, it's very difficult to keep up with everything going on. So if you're new to a community and you want to dedicate yourself to really giving an overview of what's happening on a day-to-day basis, every single DAO will find that valuable. Whether it's in the form of written content, visual content, just sitting at the center of things and really saying like, hey, on this date, we have this interview with this person. Over here, we're building this product, connecting the individuals of a group. I think that coordination is the single most valuable skill set you can bring to a DAO. And whether that's as a developer, a designer, a community builder, whatever it might be, the single most valuable thing you can do is come into that community, start learning about who's operating it on a day-to-day basis, and then make sure that everyone's on the same page, specifically outside of that core contribution team. What I notice within DAOs, it's very easy to stay on the same page with the other people that are in it on a day-to-day basis. So our product team speaks to our editorial team every single day. But if I'm just a passive participant in a DAO, my touch point might be once a week reading a newsletter or something like that. And so you being in the Discord, sharing news, tagging different channels, being like, hey, this thread's happening in this conversation, really just helping to route traffic. What you're going to notice is that I encourage all the DAOs I work on, always look inside your community. When you're looking to hire, you don't need to go and poach someone from a different DeFi team or something like that. Your best candidate is sitting in your Discord server and sending messages every single day. So make yourself very vulnerable, really put yourself out there and show that you're going to bat for a community. And I think you'll find more times than not that once you put 3 weeks into a community, it's almost extremely likely that you're going to get offered some sort of token allocation to keep doing what you're doing.
As people do that, I think one of the problems, like I'm already thinking about this now, if I want to dive in a little bit deeper here and kind of play around, have some fun, experiment, one of the constraints is going to be time. Like, let's say you find 10 different DAOs exciting and you like the communities in each. I'm sure there's going to be one you heavily allocate your time to because you just align with them better. You think it's more interesting. But there's going to be some others. You're like, I mean, I want to be a part of that. I don't have enough time. Is there a way to kind of passively invest or participate in these? Or do you think that's almost doing it the wrong way if you stretch yourself too thin into like, I want to be invested in the upside of 10 DAOs. I can really only be active in 2 or 3. How do you think you play that?
I would change it from passive to more focused. I think that DAOs are going to keep moving into more project by project basis. So rather than trying to get a salaried position in a DAO over a long time horizon, learn how to do on-chain governance, learn how to draft proposals and come to the table and say, I want to work on this specific project for this specific amount of time and get paid this amount of tokens. And when you start bucketing it into these smaller sprints with smaller working groups, you can work across a lot of DAOs. You can do that in a very pointed manner where on any given month, you'll be working with one DAO. You'll ship the thing that you said you were going to, you take those learnings, go over to the next community, and then just keep rolling it over. I mean, this has been my experience is doing things like token launches, community initiatives, governance mining initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. And what you'll find is that the more you start focusing on how to impact a project in a very meaningful way in a short period of time, once you deliver that very first thing, you now have clout in that community. And even if you're not active from a day to day, people are going to remember that.
Right.
And so you can be very passive in your participation, but still have high prowess despite the fact that you might not be in the trenches on a day to day basis.
The key is the impact then versus just like, showing up to show up. It's how much value do you give?
That's exactly right.
That's pretty cool, man. Very, very, it's an idea. I think even before this call, it was a little bit more fuzzy to me or harder to grasp, but I think laying that out is going to help a ton of people, including myself. Zooming out a little bit, what else is exciting to you I don't know if anything's going to be more exciting to you than DAOs because you're clearly doing this full time, but like there are new NFT projects, there are still new concepts that are launching every single day that people are struggling to keep up with that are pretty fucking exciting. One of them being Loot is one of the wildest ideas. It's another one of those that came out like Ether Rock, and I think when people saw it, they're like, I'm buying a text file. Like that's where we're going with this. But slowly, those are now like 10 ETH floor. People are realizing this is an entirely new way to build NFTs. This is an entirely new way to build a community and build an entire ecosystem of what a game could be. What is Loot? Because you've tweeted about this. I don't know if you're invested, but a lot of people are upset saying, damn, I should have invested in this. Now I hate seeing Loot. What's the deal with Loot?
Loot is an open source adventure game. For those who are around in DeFi summer, you might have remembered a token called Wi-Fi. That was a completely fair launch project. It had no venture funding. It had no timeline. It just dropped and it went crazy. This is NFT's version of that. The founder, Dom, had previously created a project called Blip Maps that's extremely well appreciated within the NFT community. And I think when he released this open source project that had such tiebacks to gaming, things like Magic, World of Warcraft, etc., it really just struck a chord with people. I will say that I'm not as invested as some of my colleagues. To give a quick anecdote, some people made more money on Loot than I've seen in anything in my entire life in crypto. And it's like blowing my fucking mind. For those of people who aren't aware, if you held a Loot, this week, you basically had the ability to claim AGLD, Adventure Gold Airdrop. This is essentially the governance token of Loot. But the wealth creation event that happened from this, I think in and of itself is mind-blowing. I've never seen anything like it. And so that alone, irregardless of what the project is absolutely incredible. But as you start to look under the hood, NFTs have not been very composable in nature. Typically you have series that stand alone, they build in their own silos, they build in their own ecosystems. And what Loot is challenging is that you don't need to have a closed silo for there to be value creation. It's an open source project. Everyone's building fun games on top of it. They're building different rarity trackers and tools to kind of expand the ecosystem. When you think of the initial drop as sort of that core building block, you notice that it's less about what does my specific text file do and more about the imagination of what this can become. And I think now you're starting to see things like an unbundling tool where you can deposit your Loot file into a smart contract and then unbundle that into its individual traits. The markets that are being created from these things are just absolutely incredible. And as we start to think about like DAOs and social clubs, I see Loot as kind of like the underlying infrastructure for this global RPG game. And I think the question now becomes, can this community sustain itself in the way that Wi-Fi was able to? Can they bring on core contributors to keep delivering and executing on the original premises of this community? Or is the idea too big to tackle and is it going to fizzle out? I don't know, but I definitely have some exposure to it just to see whether it goes well or not.
Yeah, that's a good strategy right now, is be exposed to an idea that's somewhat promising, and right now crypto is rewarding you for that. To give some numbers to that, I don't know what the actual Loots, what you could mint them for, but the airdrop that you just mentioned, yeah, okay, it was free. So it was free. Now those are selling for 10 to 16 ETH. I'm sure they're going to keep going up. And at the same time, the airdrop you mentioned, people got airdrop 10,000 of those governance tokens. I think those were trading at $7 this morning. So, depending on how many Loot you minted, plus the $70,000 you just got airdropped, it's like, yeah, I saw someone tweet that they went from, low 10 ETH to 7, 8, 9 figure net worth in like a week. That's wild.
Multiple people. And I will say that this was not only highly sophisticated crypto investors. These are friends who just got into crypto, a couple of months ago. The life-changing nature of what's happening in NFT right now cannot be understated. It's easy to get caught in sunshine and rainbows of thinking that every pack you open is going to net in 100 ETH mint. But when you really look at some of these case studies of how well people have done for themselves, really just by being active in the community, it's so special to me, man, because I have so many people that ask me how to get into crypto and they want to know what token to buy. They want to know what NFTs to buy. And what I keep telling them is I'm not going to be able to tell you, man, just dive in, pay attention and do the fucking work and something's going to work out. And a lot of my friends that made a killing off of Loot, they're very new to crypto. They only got in the space 3 months ago, but because they entrenched themselves in their community, they bought a Bored Ape or two. They started getting into that community. That then led to this loot drop, and then you start hearing about one or two things. It's a secret sauce, man. I mean, I don't have to tell you about it, but once you kind of get that for the first time, you literally unlock such a new chapter of life that it's completely contagious and all you will ever be able to think about.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Like, even if you would have told them what to invest in, then they probably wouldn't have actually been as invested, personally, emotionally. They wouldn't have continued diving. So it is kind of beautiful that you have to do it on your own. The other thing, yeah, I've seen two people, relatively new Twitter accounts. One I was already following, and they were just another trader I follow, used to post charts. I saw him a month ago, I think at the beginning of August. He had 5 ETH, and he said, publicly, I'm going to see what I can do with NFT investing. And he was writing a super detailed thread of like, I dove into this Discord, this is what I did. And after like a week, I was like, damn, that's impressive. He's up to like 40, 50 ETH. I think by the end of the month, he turned, I think it was 5 or 6 ETH into like $1.5 million. And I saw multiple threads like that. And I was like, oh my God. Like it is so, I don't know how you can't root that on. It's insane. And now he's full on investing. He's helping bring other people into that community, help that project grow. It's like, it's such a cool formation. Plus it's not selling an empty promise of, we're going to build X product in 10 years and I'm going to dump my tokens on you. It's no, I just believe in this community. It got bigger. I did well. And now all the other people he's helping out are doing well too. It's a much more wholesome process than I think crypto has lived through in the past.
That's exactly right. Curation is my favorite topic. I think that there's so much value in curation. And what I love about crypto is that there's been so many opportunities to do curation in a really meaningful way. Whether it was DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, whatever it might be, there are going to continually be opportunities for you to make a life-changing amount of money by being invested into crypto. So I'm really excited just to call out, like, if you're new and listening to this podcast, you have not missed the train by any way, shape, or form. We are so early in the beginning of all of these new industries that are being formed that take some time to allocate to it, whether it's a couple hours a week. I think you're going to find 6 months or a year looking back from now that it was the best decision you've ever made. Especially
if Q4 gets as crazy as you think it will be, man.
Which it will.
I love it. Coopah, I appreciate you coming on, man. Before we wrap, I want to give you a chance to share anything that you think people should be looking at, following. We've already mentioned a couple projects that you're invested in, but it could even be words of wisdom, whatever it might be, where people need to follow you. I'm going to let you kind of close this out with some closing words.
Yeah, I'd say best place to stay up with me is on Twitter. A lot of writing on a publishing platform called Mirror. I try and be very active in sharing my learnings on different sectors like NFTs, DAOs, DeFi, whatever it might be. Over the next couple months, I'm going to be writing a lot about the social clubs I'm involved with. I think this is the single best opportunity for someone to get involved with crypto in a really meaningful way. So if you're looking for a place to get started, please keep a close eye on my publications. My goal is to help connect creatives to technology in a really meaningful way. So if you're listening to this conversation, thank you for tuning in. It's only going to get a lot crazier. Eat the 15K by the end of the year. Everything going to the fucking moon. Thank you so much for having me, man. It's really an honor to be on here.
Let's go, man. I was excited to do it, and I'm really glad you came on. It exceeded my expectations. Send me over those links. I'm going to link them below first off because I want to sign up. But also for people watching here on YouTube, hit the links right down below. Hit the link. I don't see how you don't hit the link now. It's probably the best asymmetric bet you can make. And if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, hit the links right down below. Follow this man. He's criminally underfollowed. And yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for teaching me so much. And we'll chat soon.
Pleasure is all mine, man. I look forward to doing it again soon.